this guy doesn't even run hard to first base. And maybe it's game 438 of the summer for him, but still, like, I want guys that love the game. I want guys that the jersey's dirty before the game starts.
It's Monday, and it's time for another episode of the Five Tool Baseball Podcast. We're up to episode 14. I'm Dustin McComas, senior editor of Five Tool Baseball, joined again by scouting director Drew Bishop. And we got another guest on today. We got such a great feedback from our interview with Sean Allen last week. If you haven't had the opportunity to listen to that, Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Facebook, Twitter accounts. It's kind of all over the place, but go check that out. A lot of very, very insightful conversation about recruiting and college baseball. And, you know, it's nice to hear a guy like that kind of echo some of the things that we've discussed as well. But we do have another guest on today. We'll be joined by Texas State assistant coach and recruiting coordinator, Josh Blakley. But before we get to that, Drew, just first off, how was your weekend? And no football weekend for pro or college for your teams.
Both teams on a bye. It was weird.
Can't lose a bye week.
It was definitely less stressful. I'll say that. But I did have my wife's entire family in town this weekend for her 30th birthday. So I don't know if I'll get in trouble for saying the number, but it's the big 3-0 for her. And so we got all of her brothers were in town and got to spend some time with family this weekend.
Man, only 30. That seems like it was so, as two guys who recently turned 36, it's 30 seems like it was so long ago.
6 years to be exact.
Yeah, 6, but it feels like about 16 with everything that's kind of happened during that time. But the Steelers were off too, so it was a low stress football weekend. I was down at Premier at that Five Tool event, and I'll have some thoughts both in the podcast later this week, but also on the website fivetool.org as well. Getting some it was really fun, man, getting to see some of those 2022 guys again, a couple 2023s and things like that. And I credit the 2022 guys, man. They showed out. Jarrett Curtis, Chase Mora, Carson Queck, Tanner Shillette, Rashad James, Christian Salazar. I mean, all of those guys. I think James went 4 for 4 this last game. I don't think he hit a bomb. He hit a triple double. He had a bunch of doubles, but all those other guys hit bombs. It was a really fun event to be down there, and kind of carried into midnight one night because of a lightning delay down there, which typically happens at Premier. It's just Houston, man, with the weather, you're going to get it. So look for that content later this week, and we'll touch on some of those guys at the podcast as well. But that's kind of like the informal-ish into fall baseball, which, man, it flew by pretty quick. We'll really this next month really dive into the 2023 5-tool 55 process of building that list and things like that. But really excited today to get to our interview with Josh Blakley, again, Texas State assistant coach and recruiting coordinator. I know you and I are very excited to talk to him, and as we kind of continue this series, it's what we hope is a really educational and informative series for players and families about what do these guys look for when they're out recruiting? What's their calendar look like? What do they think about when they're offering players? How do they build their rosters? What's their campus like? What's their environment like? And I'm really excited to get into this interview with Josh. So let's not waste any more time. Here's our interview with Texas State assistant coach and recruiting coordinator, Josh Blakley. Yes, believe it or not, we survived our first guest interview on the Five Tool Baseball Podcast, and we got another coach that was actually willing to jump on board with Drew and I. We're joined today by Texas State assistant coach and recruiting coordinator, Josh Blakley. Josh, first off, how's the fall going for Texas State and you guys? I know you guys, I believe this weekend, have your bit of your kind of your fall World Series type thing. I know we have some Texas State fans that are tuning in. So how's the fall going for you guys?
Man, the fall went great. So I was told, right? I think at one point I'd been to 3 of the first 17 practices, through recruiting and everything, and kind of part of it with the short recruiting window that we had. But love the team, man. A lot of new faces, new energy, with some old faces as well, that sort of thing. But man, it was a great fall. Kind of some new attitudes, new culture a little bit and everything. We really had a good time with it, man. The Fall World Series was ultra competitive guys got after it. And man, we kind of finished the fall on a high note for sure.
Good. That's good to hear. And yeah, you mentioned the kind of the fall recruiting calendar. You and I are fans of the Hillsborough Starbucks. We found out after spending a couple days up at DBU. Drew, I know you've made a stop there before, but speaking of that recruiting calendar, because that's something that we've talked about, and kind of trying to educate players and families on, like, just how short of a window you guys as coaches have to go see players. So give us an example of kind of what your calendar looks like in the fall from the recruiting standpoint. And when you're going out into these fall events, maybe what are some things that you're kind of looking for? Because obviously the competition's a little bit different than the summer. You might have guys that are playing multiple sports. You might have guys that are kind of working on some things as they gear up for their high school seasons. What's that calendar look like? And maybe what are some things that you kind of try to look at in the fall when you're evaluating guys?
Yeah, we'll, we have from September 10th to October 10th. So 30 days or 31-day window, whatever that was, it was 5 weekends. And we sat down 2 weeks before it, got every junior college to send us their schedule. We highlighted all the big events, because when you only have 5 weeks, it's kind of like, where can you get the most bang for your buck, and where can I go where I'm going to see 8 teams this weekend as opposed to just 2 teams play 16 innings. And for us, we felt like we were in a pretty good spot with the 2022 class as far as high school. When we got to the end of the summer, there was a couple of guys we needed to get out and see individually, just maybe see this guy pitch at 10 a.m. in Tomball on a Thursday night or something like that. But, for us, for the most part this fall, man, we went heavy JUCO. And, what made it tough again was having the 5 weeks. And man, it's really hard to sign a guy just getting to look at him once, And so, man, I busted it hard that first 2 to 3 weeks to get out and see every team one time. Made a list on this board right over here of 25, 30 names. And it's like, okay, let's prioritize. Who do I got to get out and see again? Who do I have to see Massengale? Who do I have to send Massengale out to see as a pitcher a second time? And, really try to get out in that 5-week window and see every arm twice, see every hitter have as many at-bats as possible, whether that was 7 or 8 or it was 15 or 16, which is more ideal. But how do we get out and utilize what little bit of time we have to see guys as many times as possible? And I didn't do a lot of out-of-state stuff just because, it was hard. And I didn't want to go up to the Midwest and see an arm throw 1 inning and he's 90 to 92 with a good breaker. And I'm going crazy. That's my Friday night guy. And I sign him. And then a week later, he walks the first 3 guys he faces, that sort of thing. So, for us, we went Texas junior colleges. We went in, we went full in and hard on it. And that's just kind of where I went with it for 5 weeks.
Yeah. So Josh, one of the things that I think you share with Sean Allen is that you have worked on both sides of the ball. You've been at a number of places and you've been a head coach. How would you say that, being a pitching guy versus being a hitting guy, being a head coach, how has that shaped your recruiting philosophy? Did you have to look for different things at the different places you've been? Did the way you look at pitchers change when you started doing some of the hitting stuff and vice versa?
Yeah, I mean, I think it made me a lot more well-rounded as far as what I understand, where, maybe back in the past, you'd go see a guy and he had a big fastball and the breaking ball was a little short. And you're like, oh, well, you can fix that. Well, then you start working with pitchers and you're like, well, it's not as easy to just fix it as you might think, and, or a shortstop guy really, really hits, but he can't run. Well, like there's some limitations with that, And so I think when you've coached third base, when you've called pitches, when you've worked with both sides and you've been the head guy, so now you're worried about defense all the time and who can play catch and do things like that. You start to kind of, maybe find flaws in recruits that slow you down a little bit. Let's go see this guy again, see where he's at with that. And, that'd probably be the biggest thing for me is just all of a sudden you start thinking about it differently in the sense of, well, we got to go find the well-rounded player who can do a little bit of everything when he walks in the door as a freshman.
Sure.
You mentioned it, in the fall, sometimes you're getting a look at a guy and you don't really know how long that look is going to be. So how do you balance the in-person evaluation aspect with your background work? Because I know something that you guys really try to do is, as best as you can, kind of try to nail the makeup of a player, because you guys are looking for not just the skill and the talent, but also the mindset and the mental makeup that kind of fits what you guys want in your program. So, what kind of goes into that background work? Are you calling people or when you see a guy, because you might see a guy you really like for 2 innings, and then you got to try to figure out, man, what kind of person is this player as well?
Sure. I mean, and that's a great question, and when it comes to junior college, I don't want to say easy, but it's easier for me because I was a junior college head coach for 5 years. So I have a personal relationship with all those guys, and maybe even taken as far as the guys I know I can really, really trust and the guys I can kind of trust, that sort of thing. And so, there's certain programs where if a coach picks up the phone and calls me and says, hey, you need to get this guy, I may not need a whole lot else. Like, yeah, I'm in. Like, that guy would never lie to me. He wants me to do well. He wants Texas State to do well. If he picks up the phone and calls, he's probably really good. Let's see him once. We like it. We're all in, that sort of thing. But, no, you're right. Especially with the high school guys, for us, my dad's a longtime high school coach. I'm like a fourth generation coach. My brother's all coach. Trouty's whole family's coaches. So for us, a big part of us is going to be calling the high school coaches. And we're going to ask a lot of questions. Probably the first question is just simply, hey, man, do you like him? Because if you don't like him, there's a good chance I'm not going to like him. If I'm not liking him, then we got all sorts of issues, that sort of thing. But is he competitive? Like, how's he work off the field? I mean, is he a good teammate? All these things. Does he throw his glove after outings? And so, you kind of, and I'm stealing this from Nick Saban versus, there was a deal on HBO with Nick Saban and Bill Belichick, right? And they sat down and Saban gives a thing of, well, you call coaches and you ask about guys, and anything that comes after and is good. Like, hey, he can really hit and he's got a bazooka. Like, that's good, but anything that comes after the word but, you got to be a little scary about. Like, hey, man, he can really hit, but he doesn't really have a position, So anything that comes out the word but, you got to really turn your ears on and start to listen. But, I think same thing. It's all about relationships. There's certain travel programs that I've gotten kids from a decade. Man, same thing. When they pick up the phone, kind of like the junior colleges, you listen, right? Like, they've always sent me good players. The guys they send me have panned out. They've worked out. Let's go with them as opposed to, the team from Florida. Nothing against them, but I don't know them. Like, they're getting paid to sell their players in some aspects. Let's go with the guys that we trust, the guys we know, unless we have the opportunity to get out and maybe see 15, 20 at bats for ourselves. No, hey, this guy can hit. Or we see 2 or 3 different outings and that guy rolling out 4 or 5 innings each time. Hey, he keeps getting guys out. We like it. But no, I mean, if you just did this off of what you see, man, it'd be tough because, if you go to a game and you're just like, well, this guy didn't get a hit, he can't hit, like, it's baseball. That doesn't really work, right? Like, I go to games all the time and a guy's 0 for 2 with a walk and a hit by pitch. That doesn't mean he's not a good player. That just means he didn't have a chance to get a hit that day. Maybe he hit a ball hard, maybe he didn't. So, I think the more people you talk to, and I'll say this too, as much as we talk to their high school coach, man, if I know a coach in his district, bingo. Like, hey, man, how much do you hate when this guy walks in the box in your face? Coach, I ain't got him out for 3 years. That's my guy, right? Or, hey, man, we can't get hits off that guy. He competes, and then he may say something like, hey, man, I don't know, man, that guy runs his mouth the whole game. He's a turd. He's a dog. He pops up to the right fielder and he runs a 7 flat to first base. Maybe that's the guy we need to get out on. So I think the more people you talk to, the more information you can gather, the more you get a complete picture of maybe who a guy is,
Yeah. One of the things that we've talked about a lot on our podcast so far is, finding the right fit for you as a player. And there are kids that fit at one school because of a coach that may not fit at another school because of a coaching staff. So for you guys at Texas State, what do you guys look for or really value when you're on the recruiting trail or when you're talking to kids on the phone?
For me, it's being blue collar. Every coach on our staff played junior college baseball. I don't think any of us, I know none of us were highly coveted recruits coming out of high school. And so that doesn't mean that we don't want highly coveted recruits, but we all went through the ranks. We had the tough road, so to say. All of us had to work our way up to get to the job we now have at Texas State. Like, nothing fell into any of our laps.
Right.
And so, if we're going to be that way as coaches, then the players that are going to thrive under us are the ones that kind of buy into that process a little bit of, they don't want to be handed everything. They want to work for it. They want to go out and get some things on their own. And there's nothing better than a kid that's got a chip on his shoulder, man. I love it. Right. Yeah. Like the little bit smaller guy, and we've been unbelievably successful in the infield the last few years with slightly undersized guys that just play their tails off. Right. And I think that kind of fits us. And that doesn't mean that we don't want the 6'3" shortstop that runs a 6'5" and hits balls out of the park. Everybody wants that guy, right? But I think a lot of times it's those last signs that you do. Those seniors that you sign late, or the last second walk-ons, the small scholarship guys, the guys that maybe you see 20 times and finally like, God, every time I see that guy, I love him. Let's get that guy. That tends to be kind of the guy that fits our mold, and then, when it comes to the pitching side, looking for the right fit and different things like that, Massengale's, he's always going to want the athletic pitcher that can really spin it, so if I'm going to be a good recruiting coordinator, I've got to go find guys that kind of fit that mold a little bit. Like that's what he wants. That's what he's going to teach.
Right.
He wants guys that might throw the 2-1 breaking ball all game long and spin it for a strike. That's how he wants to get out. So, I think in the same aspect, just kind of look, what are our tendencies as coaches? What do we do well? We play in an offensive ballpark. Let's go get some guys that hit the ball out of the park, right? But trying to fit the mold of who we were as players and how we kind of coach the game for sure.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Drew.
Well, so, you touched on something that I've heard a couple of times. A lot of times you build a roster to win your conference. And
Sure.
part of that comes along with building a roster that can play in your ballpark. And when I was at Texas, I loved coming down to San Marcos because that was going to be one of our rowdiest crowds of the year. Every
Sure.
time, just the atmosphere was great. The park has had a bunch of improvements over the last decade, going back to Coach Harrington and, now that Trouty's there. But talk a little bit, for those who haven't been to the ballpark or haven't been to San Marcos, tell us a little bit about, what you guys really believe in your program and try to push as the things that are important to recruits.
Yeah, I mean, and you touched on it there with the rowdy crowd. One thing we're pretty proud of is, and this goes back to Ty Harrington being here since 2000, we have over 1,000 season ticket holders.
Wow.
So,
Awesome.
I mean, we can play the schools that you don't think we're gonna have big crowds and we'll still get 1,000 people at games, and when you have 1,000 season ticket holders, you're going to have the pass list for both teams with parents and girlfriends and brothers and sisters and friends. You're going to get 400 or 500. Well, when you have 41,000 students, it's nothing to get another 1,000 people to the game and have a 2,500 fan sellout, So
Right.
We've always had a great atmosphere at Texas State. We've been top 40 in attendance for a long time, and, it's a really special place as far as all that goes. And the river runs through the middle of campus. We're in the hill country. There's a lot of ways to attract kids to come to Texas State. There's a lot of things that they like about it, that sort of thing. And, we're obviously trying to get the baseball to a standpoint to where we're perennial regional type teams and doing things like that. And, I don't remember what the original question was anymore, to be honest with you, but
yeah, really. I think you hit on most of it. I just, what kind of things do you guys talk about and try to tell kids that have never had a chance to be in your ballpark or down around campus?
Sure. And one way I think we do a great job of attracting recruits is, you're never going to look up perfect game and go to Texas State and look at our commitment list and be like, man, those guys are overcommitting. Like when we commit a guy, we're pretty, we're invested in him, so to say.
Right.
We're going to bring that guy to campus. We're going to give him time to develop in our program, that sort of thing, to become a guy for us. And we're not just going to cast a wide net, catch all the minnows and see which one turns into a bass, that sort of thing. And, that's something we're pretty proud of. And like I said, we just don't overdo it, man. We're going to go out and we're going to find 5 or 6 high school arms a year. We're going to find a shortstop. We're probably going to find a catcher. We're probably going to find an outfielder. And then we're going to take those 8 or 9 guys and we're going to start to look at, well, what else do we need from the transfer portal, from junior college? Where do we need an instant need? Like this year we have 3 senior infielders. That's awesome for this year. That's terrifying for next year, right? Like we have some really good younger players, but I don't know how many opportunities they're going to get right now if we stay healthy. And so, looking at that, trying to fit the roster molds and go about it and trying to figure out who we need. But, just coming full circle a little bit, just always kind of harping on the fact to our guys, like, hey man, when you commit to Texas State, you're going to be a Bobcat. Like that's probably the most important thing about it. And you're not going to come in and there be, 7 shortstops your freshman year, and you could be a really good player, but you're the 5th best shortstop. Now we're sending you off to junior college, and it's just a depth chart problem, that sort of thing.
Right.
And so I think our guys, they love that. I think they believe in that when they get here. And probably what's even better is we bring kids on campus, we let them talk to the players that are currently here, and they're happy in our program. If you go on ncaa.org and log into my apps and go to the transfer portal, you're not going to find many Texas State Bobcats in the transfer portal. And I think that just goes to show that we're not over recruiting. Our guys are happy here. They like the coaching staff. We're treating them the right way. They want to be at Texas State. And I think we got a good thing going as far as any of that goes right now.
Yeah, along those lines, it's something that Drew and I have mentioned, when players and families are kind of evaluating programs, you got to pay attention to, are they bringing in 20 guys a year and 15 guys are going out the door and that sort of thing, and rosters, things like that. How much pride do you guys take in the development side? Because, it's one thing to sign those smaller classes and you're loyal to those guys, you can get them in there and that sort of thing. But those guys have got to want to stay there too once they get on campus. What allows you to have that retention rate, and how much pride do you guys take in development? Because it's, it seems like for, long over a decade now that you guys, are consistently developing talent, and guys are getting to the MLB draft as well.
Right. And one thing that we do talk about with recruits, we've had quite a few pitchers drafted in the last 4 or 5 years. And one thing that we consistently bring up to, parents and recruits is none of the guys have been drafted out of Texas State in the last 4 or 5 years, maybe the last decade. I don't want to misspeak here, but none of those guys were drafted out of high school. So that they came in as really good high school players, are going to be good college pitchers, and were developed into professional level talent. And it's nothing again. Again, I wish I could get guys that are drafted in the first, second round out of high school. But, I think there's a difference in taking a good high school pitcher and developing him into a draft pick, and taking a third rounder and shepherding him for a few years and he gets drafted again, that sort of thing. And so, that all speaks to development. Our strength conditioning coordinator is an absolute stud. Guy named Lance Sewell, he's been in professional baseball. He was at Texas, West Virginia, Tennessee. Yeah. He does a fantastic job. And Chad Matzik, our pitching guy, he's phenomenal, man. He's laid back with those guys. He sticks them in routines. He talks to them every day. He develops them as strike throwers. And really and truly, he gives them kind of an environment where it's easy to thrive and grow. There's not, like I said, you're not having a bad outing and he's bringing you to the back of the dugout, yelling and screaming at you. How could you do that? You're soft, and really being negative with those guys, where it's always a process of building you back up. Because at the end of the day, we're trying to get results in February, March, April, May, hopefully June. Right. It's not really about where's a guy at in September, October. Right now, it's a building process to get those guys hopefully this year where they need to be. But if not this year, then how are we building them over the next 2 years to turn them into guys where we can go out and pitch at a 3-something ERA, or we can go out and win the Sun Belt, get into regionals? How do we go win the first game of a regional wherever we're at? Those are the things where we're trying to build those guys every day.
Yeah, I can echo your sentiment on the strength coach, Lance Sewell. Definitely one of the best in the business. He was my strength coach when I played in college, and you may or may not know this, but my first career outing came against UT San Antonio in 2007 on the team that you played for. So I was trying to find the box score to see if you pitched in that game or not. But I know that I pitched the 9th inning on April 3rd, 2007. So that's
it in San Antonio, or was it?
No, it was in Austin. It was in Austin. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So, yeah. But
I remember there was a game where Augie was suspended. Not suspended. I'm sorry. I don't know what he was. Don't get me lying. And we beat you guys at Wolf. And I think y'all returned the favor pretty handily, if I remember right, the next year in Austin.
Yeah, definitely. He was suspended that game. I do remember that because Coach Harmon was filling in that day, and he was kind of the fiery coach of our staff. And we were just expecting to get lit up post game by Coach Harmon, but we had a big weekend coming up following with Nebraska. So he was kind of like, hey, turn the page, let's get home and, go to work. But yeah. So, not to change the subject too much, but I'm going to go back to, something you said. You guys have done a great job in development over the time. And I know Coach Trout has, and going back to Coach Harrington, but, like you said, you guys are not a program that just brings in a ton of players and just processes them out after the fall or after 1 year. If you don't get the results you like, that puts a lot more pressure on you. And to do so, you're going to have to be looking for the right things when you're out on the recruiting trail. So, the misconception for a lot of people is that, you guys are out on the road looking for the guys that hit home runs or throw over 90, those are the key factors. But when you show up at a ballpark, what are you looking for on both the pitching side and the position player side?
Sure. You mentioned the word pressure. I mean, pressure is a privilege, right? Like you earn the fact to get put in those pressure situations. And, for me, like I said, I mean, we're all looking for somebody that can do something that maybe not everybody else can do, right? That could be an unbelievable breaking ball, big fastball, the ability to really run or hit the ball out of the park, that sort of thing. But, kind of the hidden things I think are what we touched on earlier in a sense of, do his coaches like him? Do his teammates like him? Because we've all played probably at some point with a guy that's a phenomenal player and nobody really cares for him. And as much as those guys may win you games, they can also lose you games. They can lose you a whole, even more than one game, that sort of thing, because they end up becoming cancers. And so, really checking on that. Does the guy play hard? Does he play with energy? I'm not going to say I cross every guy out that doesn't run hard to first base. Man, there's definitely a mental note and a note that goes in the column on the roster of, I don't know, do I want to deal with that for the next 3 years? Like, this guy doesn't even run hard to first base. And maybe it's game 438 of the summer for him, but still, like, I want guys that love the game. I want guys that the jersey's dirty before the game starts. Like, that's who I was as a player. My mom hated me. Like, golly, you got to wash your pants. You didn't even pitch today, or you didn't play. I went and slid in the dirt because that's what baseball players do. And those are the guys you want. The guys that are talking, the guys that are laughing. The score's 6-2. I'm still a ball player. I'm still getting after it. But when it comes to making decisions and things like that, I think I've morphed a little bit in the way I look at things. We're used to, I'd be really disgruntled when I'd love a player and I'd lose him, like he'd go somewhere else or whatever it might be, and now it's more along the lines of, it still hurts a little bit. But now I think the thing that gets you beat isn't necessarily the players that you don't get. It's more the players that you do get that don't pan out, and so at any given time, if we've got 27, right now we have 32 guys on scholarship, like everybody. And, if you've only got 20 of those 32 that are ready to play for you, then you're probably not doing your job as a recruiting coordinator. If you've got 25, 6, 7, 8 of those 32 that are ready to go, then that's what you should be doing, And so obviously we all need a Friday night guy that goes out, takes the ball in 7 innings, that guy's going to keep you in the game, that sort of thing. But, I think what gets you beat at the end of the day is not having the depth. And so for me, it's more about, how confident am I when I'm watching this guy that he's going to turn into the shortstop I need him to turn into? He may not do it when he's 19 as a freshman, but at some point, is he going to be a shortstop? Is he going to be able to hit in our 3, 4, 5 hole if he's a corner guy, that sort of thing? Is he going to be able to go play center field? And I think too, like for me, when you start looking at it, like when they're young, especially position players, like maybe they're not ready to hit. There's something to that. They need at bats. Like some guys are ready, some guys aren't. That's really hard to be able to tell when you watch high school games and they're hitting 82-mile-an-hour fastballs and high school breaking balls, that sort of thing. But, if the kid can throw and he can run and he can defend and he can bring you some sort of value as a freshman, and so if he brings some sort of value as a freshman, the hitting's going to come. Like I trust Trouty, I trust Jerry, I trust our hitting guys to develop the mental side of hitting and the physical side of it, get those guys in the cages. We'll send them out there in summer ball and get them another 185 at bats where they're going to develop. Eventually, they're going to become a productive Division I offensive player. But, for me, I think right away it's, hey, man, where's this guy at defensively? So that, hey, man, like I said, if our right fielder goes down, I need my freshman right fielder to at least be able to go out there and be a plus defender in right field. And can he bunt? Can he at least run the first, steal a bag if he needs to? So there's some sort of offensive production when he gets in there.
Josh, the in terms of offering and things like that, we've discussed you guys are in a unique position with 11.7 relative to basketball and football and everything else. What's maybe one thing that you wish more players or more families knew as they're going through the recruiting process? Because it's, things are a little bit more difficult for you guys. You're juggling a lot of numbers. You can offer scholarships different ways. What's maybe something you wish more players and families knew as they were going through this process?
Well, I think with a program like ours, you have to understand I'm not just recruiting good players. I'm recruiting to fill a roster. Like I'm recruiting a team, right? Like you may be an unbelievable right fielder and you might be able to hit my 3-hole one day, but that doesn't mean I need a right fielder, a corner outfielder in my 2022 class, so it's not personal, that sort of thing. And I think every guy's recruiting process is unique. It's different. I've had to remind myself of that a few times, like this guy, you get the kid on campus, he commits on the spot, man, that was so easy. And then you get, a week later, you get another kid, he has no other offers. He thinks he loves it, but he wants to wait till the end of the spring season. You're like, what's different, and so you start to get frustrated, but I have to remind myself as a recruiting guy, like same thing, every recruiting process is unique. This is just that guy's recruiting process. This is what it's going to take to get him to campus. And it's my job to figure that out and figure out how I'm going to have to recruit that guy. Like, hey man, is he an upbeat guy? He wants to talk to Blakley and Trout. He's a little more laid back. He's more of a Massengale type guy. Does somebody get on the phone with mom and break down the program and how we're going to take care of her kid? Or, what is it? But you asked what I wish people knew. When we have camps, man, we break down scholarships with kids all the time, like, and not offering them scholarships. Yeah. This is how the scholarship process works, and right now we have 32 guys on scholarship. You have 11.7. That comes out to an average of 36%, and it's $21,000 to go to Texas State. And like, you tell people that, so 36% of 21,000 is our average scholarship. Like, mom, dad, you may be responsible for $12,000 to $13,000, and they're just mind blown. Like, whoa, we paid all this money to play select baseball and all this stuff all these years, and it's just the culture of college baseball right now with the 11.7. And so, what I wish they knew, man, take care of your academics. Man, if you can throw $4,000 on top of that, how much does that help? And right. There's different places to live where you can save some money and do some things. But I think that's a big part of it. And, people all the time get, I have kids like, man, I got offered percentage. Like, they love the percentages in baseball. 85%. Holy moly, dude. You better take it if it's real, and, we always, when we offer a kid, we show them like the offer sheet, you know what I'm saying? And it says tuition is $9,227 at Texas State University. And the dorms cost this much, meal plans cost this much. This is what you got for. And so when we show them the percentage, it can mean something. So what I would always tell guys is like, hey, you get on the phone and somebody says, we're going to give you 75%. Well, at some point, I think kids going to get excited. I get that, right? That's why we do it. So at some point, I would encourage mom and dad, hey, get on the phone. Coach, can you break down what we're going to have to pay, like 75% of the cost of attendance, 75% of tuition, because those things have a way of changing come, actual time to sign your scholarships and stuff. And, we're all working class people, that sort of thing. So at the end of the day, like mom and dad, like, you don't need a percentage. You need somebody to tell you, hey, what am I going to have to pay to attend Texas State University my freshman year of school or my junior year of school if I'm a transfer, that sort of thing, or wherever school you might be going to. Just tell me, hey, give me the hard numbers. What do I got to pay to go to school?
Yeah, for sure. So what, you guys get a family or a kid on a visit. What's something that you guys talk about that you're really looking to hear, or what's something you think that you hear kids say it just fires you guys up and you're like, yeah, that's a Texas State kid?
First thing, man, they all want to start talking about the river, so obviously you got to get I had a dad literally on a visit tell me the other day, he was like, hey, like in my ear, he's like, I ought to put a box of applications right here. We were down at the river. I was like, no doubt. Right. But, I think kids a lot of times, depending on where they're from, maybe they haven't been around Texas State. We're not blessed to host all the big tournaments during the summer like some of these schools. So I think they get a little blown away, like, man, those facilities are awesome. Yeah. And as much as that is, I think when we walk them around campus, like mom and dad are like, I didn't know Texas State was this big. I didn't know campus was this nice. Like, holy cow, like the city, we're in the hill country. There's big trees all over the place. The quad, Old Man, there's a lot of really cool places in San Marcos. There's a lot of places unique to San Marcos, a lot of restaurants that have been open in downtown San Marcos for 25 years. And a lot of alumni have come in and opened up little restaurants here and there. They're unique. And so I think when you come on an official visit, man, we can put you in some really cool places, and it's a college town. I think anywhere you go in this city, man, you're going to see a Texas State flag on the wall. You're going to see Texas State polos and hats. And, if it's Saturday, the football game's on every TV in town, and there's a good atmosphere around, and there's 20,000 people tailgating in the parking lots. And I think people are kind of like, man, I didn't expect this from a, I hate to even say the word non-Power 5 school, but man, I never expected y'all would have this much support. And I'm like, yeah, man, when you got, 41,000 students, and probably 30,000 of them live right here within 5, 6, 7 miles of campus. Like, you're going to see Texas State everywhere you go. Every car's got it on there, you know? And so it's just cool. You go in a restaurant, there's a mural of the baseball team on the wall. Like, it's pretty awesome, you know? So I think anywhere you go in the city, you feel supported. And, you know, like I said, I think people just think they're going to just another run-of-the-mill mid-major or whatever you want to call it, that sort of thing. And then they get here and like, man, this place is way more than I expected, you know?
Sure.
Yeah, I gotta imagine those summer visits, probably a pretty good time to bring guys on campus. I've spent some time going around there, and I know that could be something that's pretty attractive to recruits on campus with everything going on there. And you mentioned 41,000 students, a lot of alums too. You know, when I spent years covering Texas, and when those Texas State midweek games would happen in Austin, I mean, thousands of Texas State fans, you know, travel with the team, or students come down and things like that. So, you know, how much fun is it to have that sort of atmosphere and that sort of energy accompanying the program? Because you mentioned it, you guys are non-Power 5, but at the same time, you're starting to see a lot of programs at that level in college baseball really invest more in facilities and kind of raise the profile of their programs. And that support goes a long way, I'm sure.
Yeah, you know, and that's our goal, right? Like, how do we become the mid-major that has a chance to go to Omaha at some point, that can get into a super regional once in a while, you know? And then it's a whole other ball game to start winning those games. But, you know, the first thing is, how do we become that program that is 3 or 4 years in a row in a regional, mainstay in a regional, you know, like some of these mid-majors have started doing. And, you know, I think our athletic department has truly invested in baseball, which is awesome for us. You know, we have a brand new locker room, brand new coaches' offices. We're about to get a building, you know, down the third baseline with indoor cages and everything. We're really close to getting that done. Video room, training rooms, all that stuff. And so, you know, when they start investing in it, man, it's awesome. And you start to get that support, and people start getting fired up. And, you know, we've had a good history of baseball. And, you know, I don't want to say the only sport, one of the only sports on campus that can get Texas to come play us at home, A&M to play us at home, Baylor. We played TCU in Oklahoma at home last year. We've had Tech down here before, you know. So when you can get those schools to campus, well, yeah, people are going to get fired up because they don't expect that at Texas State a little bit. And then, you know, we've had a decent history of winning some of those games, and all of a sudden you knock off one of the traditional powerhouses or whatever at home, and people get fired up and they start traveling. And, you know, but with all the energy and everything else comes some pressure too, right? Like, hey, man, you don't want to get embarrassed in front of 2,500 people, you know? So, yeah, but I mean, it's great, man. Like, our kids feel it all around. And like I said, it's unique for me because it's the first job I've had where you drive around town and people know you a little bit. Like, hey, coach, how was the game? Man, hey, so you guys won last night, big time, you know. And you know, we beat Oklahoma at home last year, and I go to eat with my parents after the game, and it's like 100 people in a restaurant just left the game, and they're fired up. And I was like, man, this is pretty incredible. You know, even my parents had something to say about it. And you know, like, man, this is awesome. This unique atmosphere. Like, good for you, you know?
Yeah. Well, Josh, thanks so much for the time, man. I know we really appreciate it. And I know this has been very educational. That's one thing Drew and I are very passionate about, is try to provide a resource for players, for families that are going through the recruiting process, and to give, you know, guys like you a platform to, you know, talk about your program and things like that. So, Drew, any last thing? We got about a minute left.
No, that was awesome, man. You know, I can't tell you enough how much we loved going down to San Marcos when I was at Texas. Just like you mentioned a couple of times, the atmosphere is electric. The ballpark's great. And like you said, all the new additions coming, you know, it's a special place, and it's a program that you guys should definitely be proud of.
No, man. And I appreciate you guys having me on, and I appreciate what you're doing too. It's pretty awesome, man. I hope a lot of kids get on and listen, and parents get on and listen, because it's going to be very informative. And, and you guys keep fighting the good fight, you know, keep doing what you're doing. So
awesome. Well, appreciate it, Josh. Thanks so much, man.
Yeah. See you guys.
Well, Drew, it's safe to say we're 2 for 2 on awesome interviews with these guys. Some really great stuff from Texas State assistant coach and recruiting coordinator Josh Blakley. And we were talking about this, you know, off air before we jumped back on again. It's nice to hear these guys echo a lot of things that we've been saying. Not because, hey, we're right, but just kind of that reinforcement of these are the types of things that guys look for when they're out watching players, or the types of things they're thinking about when they're offering guys, or they're team building and things like that. So what are some of the things that Josh touched on that really resonated with you during that interview?
Well, there's a couple of things from a playing standpoint. We just keep hearing over and over how much guys that play hard stick out.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it's, we've talked about it before, but in our game that happens to be really tough, anything that you can control is something worth doing. And running hard to first base is something that you can control and should never not happen. Right. It's just something that's easy to do. It gives a coach a lot of information about you as a player. And then conversely, if you don't do it, it gives them a lot of information too.
Yeah.
So, make a point to run hard and play hard. And, I don't think that they're going to penalize you when you're playing that last game of the summer if your times are a little slower down the line. But if you're noticeably not giving effort, you're going to get yourself crossed off some lists. But he mentioned that just talking a lot about the, kind of the electricity that's provided by the San Marcos and Texas State atmosphere.
Yeah.
I've been there multiple times and it's wild. It would be definitely in the top, probably 4 or 5 atmospheres in the Big 12. That place is always packed. The ballpark's great. San Marcos is fun. There's a lot to do. So from a program standpoint, you can't call them up and coming because of the amount of success that they've had going back over the last 15 to 20 years with Coach Harrington being there and making that program a power. But it's a great spot. And I think it's always interesting to hear that a lot of these guys, no matter what level they're coaching, they're a lot of times looking for the same things.
Yes. Yeah. And it's, it's funny. I feel like, Sean mentioned this, Josh mentioned this. I feel like every coach we talk to is going to mention this in some ways, but it's really easy for those guys to remember the guys that like don't run or don't give effort or do something like that. Like, it's just one of those things that forever sticks with those guys. Like, when I think of the summer, my first month with 5-tool and going out to events, and I'll never forget the dude that got tossed from the Mattingly, throwing a fit in the dugout and things like, just like coaches will never forget the guy that he mentioned getting down the line to 7 flat. Like I'll never forget the guy I saw that bat flipped a single and got down the line in 6.6. Like, that sort of stuff like is easy for guys to recall. It's like, oh yeah, like this guy did this. Yeah. I'm gonna note that, like, for sure, and sure enough, like, the guy I saw get tossed from the Mattingly, the scouts I was sitting beside either texted their area guy or wrote something down about that. So like players just, don't give those guys a reason to just like put that little thing beside you. Like you can stand out by playing hard, and you can definitely stand out by not doing that. But yeah, you mentioned the atmosphere of Texas State. That game that Texas played down there this past season, it was like the Mitchell Daly coming out party. It was phenomenal with the glove, but like that atmosphere, like it was wild, and talking to players that played in that atmosphere when I was covering Texas and stuff like that. And yeah, we definitely can't call Texas State up and coming because they're coming and they're doing a good job with that. But just one thing that really resonated with me is I'm always curious to hear how these coaches really try to figure out who these players are, because like Josh mentioned, and like we've mentioned before, the recruiting calendar can be tough. He said that he basically either had 30 or 31 days in the fall to get out and see guys, and they did a lot of JUCO work this fall, which, we're going to do some definitely some junior college specific podcasts and things like that. But man, can it be a great recruiting ground for these D1 programs. But, he said he basically had 30 or 31 days to get out and see a bunch of guys. And he even mentioned like, that requires him missing fall practices at times because he's out recruiting, because they've got to get out and see guys during that shortened calendar. But, he mentioned calling high school coaches, and calling travel coaches that he has a relationship with, or, the best part would be calling a high school coach that's in the same district as a player and just saying, hey man, what do you think about this guy? And, if he gets that, well, I'm not quite sure, or yeah, just don't, this guy did this or that negatively or whatever, that can be the difference, man. That could be that tiebreaker broken that other way. As opposed to, he calls that coach and, opposing coach in the district, like, we just can't get the guy out. He's super competitive. He plays hard all the time. Like that stuff can go such a long way. And those are the types of conversations that these coaches have to have, because they might just get a look or 2 looks, or if they're fortunate enough in the fall, it's multiple looks and they're really trying to make a decision on a guy. But they're really doing their homework and calling around to say, hey, who are these guys as players? Because you're seeing them more often than I am. And I trust what you're going to tell me.
Yeah, I know, he said he stole the line from Coach Saban, but, I think it's something to impress to kids across the board is work every day to be an and guy, not a but guy. And that's BUT. But I mean, it's just, like coaches talk to a lot of different people when they're trying to make a decision on certain kids as a player. And, it may not always be the people that you would think that they're going to be talking to. So, understand how you come across not only to your team, but to people sitting in the stands, to coaches across the field, to other players. You can get a lot of good information from players on what type of teammate a kid is. And, if you're not treating people on your team well, and that gets said to somebody on another team and that spreads, I mean, that can be a black mark against your name in the recruiting world. So, find ways to work hard and be an and guy. It kind of similar to what Sean Allen said with being a top step guy, be an and guy, not a but guy.
I won't. Yeah, I'm going to leave that alone. We can
grow up.
We can go a lot of different places with that thing, but no, it's a great point. I mean, when I was doing the 5 tool 55, I called coaches. I called high school coaches. I called travel coaches because those guys can be fantastic resources because they're around these guys all the time. They're around them when things are going great, when things are not going so great, practices, extra time, just hanging out, like whatever it is. And, that's these coaches. I mean, they're spending a lot of time doing that because like, they might be only able to see guys in person during a certain time. They can talk to coaches whenever they want. They can call up people and text people and things like that just to try to get an idea of who these guys are. And I really appreciated hearing Josh talk about, hey, when these guys come on visits and things like that, we really explain the offer process. We really explain the money and the cost of tuition and room and board. And hey, here's some other places that can kind of cut down and things like that. It's hearing him say like there are parents sometimes that just don't realize like how much tuition is or how much it is all around to go to Texas State. And it can be eye-opening for those parents. And there's like, oh my gosh, like I thought that, this much of a scholarship will basically cover everything. And that's not often the case. And it's just another reminder for families that are going through this process or will eventually go through this process. You can really help yourself out by doing some homework and kind of getting out in front of like knowing kind of a loose expectation of what you're getting into from the financial world before you even get those offers, if you're fortunate enough to.
For sure. And, I think one of the things that he touched on that makes a lot of sense and is an easy way to describe the roster building component is that you need to understand that the offer isn't always necessarily what they think of your son or you if you're the player. A lot of times, these guys are tasked with building an entire team. And, sometimes they may really like you enough to give you something to get you into school because they feel like they need you on the roster, even when they don't have a ton of money available. So just understanding that, I think, can take out a lot of the heartache. And a lot of times too, obviously they're really upfront with the offers and the way they do things. And, it sounds like they're even willing to tell you some stuff you won't necessarily want to hear up front, but I'd take pay a lot of attention to programs that are willing to do that, because if they're willing to tell you things that you might not want to hear early on and upfront in the process, they're probably going to be truth tellers to you while you're in school and not just blowing smoke and misleading you. Cause I think a lot of times that's where a lot of the real heartache comes, is when you're totally blindsided. And if you have a staff that's willing to tell you, things in the recruiting process that you may not find super pleasant, or when it comes to an offer, it may be less than you were hoping to receive from that school. If they're not going to go out and sugarcoat it and try to tell you something that's going to lead to problems down the road, I think that's a good sign, as uncomfortable as it might be in the moment.
Yeah, it's a great point, and they discussed like, hey, when a guy commits to Texas State, they're loyal to that guy. It's not one of these things where you're committing a guy and just to see if he turns out to be good and then kind of make a decision from there. And look, I get it. I mean, these guys are tasked with winning games. Like, when it comes time and coaching changes happen and things like that, like these people that are making decisions at the higher up level aren't looking back at, okay, well, you didn't run off a bunch of guys in recruiting. Oh, I'm going to give you another year, that sort of thing. So I get it. I mean, there's a lot of pressure on winning, but you could tell that Josh and that staff takes a lot of pride in, hey, when they commit a guy, they are committed to that guy. They want to get them in the program. They want to develop them. They want to stick by those guys. And it also kind of, does put pressure on them. Like, hey, they got to be right at a high level, as well, kind of cutting down that margin from there. But yeah, you mentioned it and he mentioned it as well. Like, you might be a stud shortstop, but there might be some programs that don't necessarily need a shortstop in that class. I've talked to various college coaches and just about, kind of picking their brain about the 2022 class and things like that. And, I've heard sometimes like, oh man, we've already got this much money allocated to outfielders. So we're not really looking for an outfielder, or, they might like an outfielder, but they just don't really have that much money to offer, but they'll still try to get them. Like, so it's not necessarily representative of your true talent level. If it's like, hey, like, we're offering you this much money. Sometimes they've got guys that are already committed there and things like that. And that's just all they can allocate to that area. So, the 11.7, the math of the process, it's a constant juggling act for these coaches as they're trying to build the best team. And that's one thing that Josh discussed is they're trying to build the best team, not necessarily, and Sean said this as well, not necessarily grab the most talent as possible. And, fortunately for programs like Texas and Texas State right now, they're in a position where they've done a good job in previous years to where they can be selective and they can try to roster build and things like that, as opposed to really trying to get that foundation of their program going just with a bunch of talent, no matter the position.
Yeah. I mean, it's a never ending puzzle, and the places that do it right and spend some time on the development side for guys that are on campus, it just, a lot of times it leads to better, more successful programs because they have a foundation, and that's built through recruiting. And if you're a program that just churns guys through left and right, you may have varying levels of success over time. And there's some programs that have made a living out of doing it. But they may or may not be thought of all that well in the recruiting world because of it.
Yeah. It's something that, the more it happens, it's something that probably some people file away and definitely keep in mind as well. But again, great stuff from Josh. I really appreciate him coming on board. Another guest of what we hope is many, coaches and people like that can get on here and just really share those experiences, because those guys are living it day in, day out. They're out on the recruiting trail. They're talking to coaches. They're watching players. They're the best resource for amateur players and families and things like that about, what these guys look for and what goes into the recruiting process. And from their end, like, what's a scholarship offer like, and things like that as well. So Josh really covered a bunch of great stuff. But before we get out of here, Drew, you got a World Series prediction? I've kind of gotten over the heartbreak of my Red Sox getting bounced. It just turns out that Framber Valdez and Luis Garcia, man, I don't know if you saw Luis Garcia pitch in that game. Man, I mean, he was dotting 97, 98, and then the slider he was throwing to the glove side of righties. It's just, there's just tip your cap. There's not really anything you do about that. But Atlanta finishes off LA, which was definitely an upset in that situation. The Astros certainly were not an upset over the Red Sox. They were the favorite, even out without Lance McCullers. But how do you think this World Series shapes out?
I'm not going to give a prediction, but I want the Braves to win.
Fair enough. I don't need to echo that, but I am hoping for what is a really, really entertaining series. And I mean, the Braves are fun to watch. I mean, not that the Astros aren't fun to watch. It's just that we've seen them in 5 straight ALCS. And Atlanta's been in the postseason pretty frequently too, but like, I don't know, man, like Jock Peterson and Austin Riley and Ozzie Albies and those guys. I think it's got a chance to be a really, really entertaining World Series. And how about a guy like Tyler Matzik? Like, kind of
We
almost,
had
I mean,
we
he
had
hit basically baseball rock bottom, and now look at him now.
Yeah, we had Tyler on a visit my first year on staff, I'm pretty sure. I mean, I know we had him on a visit, but I'm not positive it was my first year. But we had him on a visit. He ended up signing with Oregon because I think I want to say his older brother had also. But I remember for whatever reason, he was obsessed with this new uniform that they were getting. It was like one of the first ones that they had pinstripes, but it was like micro text. And if you like had a magnifying glass on the pinstripes,
Oh,
it was the
wow.
fights. It was the fight song.
That's so
But
Phil Knight in Oregon.
yeah. But a great dude. He was a great kid. We had a lot of fun with him on his visit. So it's good. You know, that's one of the cool things about the postseason for organizations like that, you know, may have some up and coming young stars. You know, it'll be fun to watch, and hopefully they give us some entertainment over the next couple of weeks and in the baseball season on a good note.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I certainly don't want the baseball season to end, but I'm already kind of counting down the days to pitchers and catchers. I've already started on my 2022 fantasy baseball rankings. So part of that is the football season, but also part of that is I'm already looking ahead to what baseball is going to have in store for us. But yeah, Tyler Matzik, another example of you just don't know sometimes what's going to win kids over in recruiting. Like sometimes it can be the uniforms. Although that was a guy that probably had a pretty good idea he wasn't going to spend any time in college. Yeah. Throw that hard from the left side with that kind of breaking ball. Yeah, you're probably not going to end up in college.
We weren't too upset that we didn't get him for that reason alone.
yeah, exactly. Like, you know, and I'm sure that he probably got some high percentage offers from those college programs that recruited him, knowing that he wasn't going to show up. So, well, thanks again to Josh Blakley from Texas State for joining us, and for Drew Bishop, I'm Dustin McComas. Thank you again for listening to another episode of the 5-Tool Baseball Podcast, episode 14 in the books. Again, you can find us on Apple Podcasts. Just search 5-Tool Baseball Podcast. You can follow us on Podbean. You can hit the follow button there, so that way you get a notification anytime a new one goes up. Definitely on Twitter, my Twitter at Dustin L. McComas, Drew's Twitter at Drew H. Bishop, the 5-Tool Twitter account. You can find us on Facebook as well. We both have personal Facebook pages. We're kind of spitting out some baseball thoughts about players in the game and things like that, trying to help kind of be another resource for families and things like that. But definitely the 5-Tool Baseball Facebook page and Instagram page and TikTok page. I mean, we're all over social media with a ton of great content as well. So I hope you guys have a good Monday. I hope you have a good week. Thank you for listening. And until we talk to y'all next time, take care.